I'm CK. Tonight we're going to be starting a new eurorack build, and I say starting because this is the size of the panel. It's a big one. This is Future Sound Systems Brunswick Synth, and I bought this from thonk.co.uk. As you probably know by now, I buy most of my eurorack stuff from Thonk. Very responsive, almost like being next door. And we'll see what this one's like. It's got a lot of stuff, and it's actually, well, we'll get into that once I go into all the parts. Hope you enjoy it. So let's see how much work I'm in for here. I'm going to start with getting the build document from Thonk's website. Yep, that's not it. Where are we? There we are. And we'll have that loaded up. So I know that we all want to see the panel before we see what's in the box. So we'll get that out. So it says Brunswick right there. And then here's the panel, and I'm not sure, it's also the PCB. I'm not sure it has a panel per se. I think it may just use the circuit board as the panel, which is fine. Nothing wrong with that. You can see that we've got a whole bunch, we've got a whole bunch of jacks for all the parameters in and out. The only thing I'm gonna complain a little bit about is, well, let me give you an example. Hold on one second. Now on many synths, like a complicated one like this Moog Mother 32, we have highlights saying this is an out, this is an out, this is an out, no highlight, these are ins. And that's just nice to have, because it's when you're working quickly or trying to find a particular parameter, you might say to yourself, well, I know the parameter I'm looking for is an in, so I'm looking for a non-highlighted jack. I know I'm looking for an out, so I'm looking for a highlighted jack, which narrows down your search. And that can be very handy. This does not have that, so here's low pass filter in, band pass filter in, high pass filter in, and then, oh, I'm sorry, that's not a good example because they don't have an out. Here's PC in and PC out, and the text looks the same. Again, this is really nitpicky. I'm not going to disagree with that, but it does make a difference when you're using it, particularly if you're in an environment where you may be using the synth in low light. Just consider next time they run this board changing that to having a standard for non-highlight for in, highlighted for out. And just a request from a user. Now they do have, so this is Rev 3, 17 October 2018. Okay, one other thing, and we'll notice it in a second, there's two big boxes here, and we'll see those in a minute. So this is the Brunswick Synth. That's the board. Now let's look at the stuff in the bag. First thing I'll point out is this, which am, however you want to conjugate it. It's two 9-volt battery holders, which go here and here on the back. It is 9-volt, two 9-volt battery powered. It is not eurorack bus powered. So that's neither good nor bad, it just is. The only bad part about it is you gotta remember to have spare 9-volt batteries around. I don't, obviously, because I haven't built it yet, I don't have any idea what the current consumption on this is, so I don't know how long a pair of 9-volt batteries will last. But we will find out, and I'll report back sometime in the future. Some resistors. Here is a variety, some op amps and some transistors. Oh, and here we go again. I will always complain about this. Do you see all these plastic bags? We did not need all these plastic bags for this. It's just a waste and makes me grumpy. There are lots of ways to organize things that aren't using a bunch of plastic bags. I recommend looking at someone like Division 6, who in their kits doesn't use bags for the parts at all. They have except for a couple, they have their own rather unique way of providing the parts in a nicely laid out way, and it just uses one piece of paper tape. So it's not all this plastic that's just going to go to waste. So let's see if there's anything interesting in here. Bunch of diodes. That's interesting. That's 2, 4, 6. There's 12 diodes in there. Caps, resistors, caps, resistor, matched pair of transistors, resistors, couple of caps, diodes, including one LED so far. I'm looking for anything unusual now. Nope, nothing unusual in that bag. Let's see what's in the mechanical bag, and I've got another parts tray for that. Okay, we've got a bunch of pots, and I'm sure they're different. I'm sure they're different tapers on the curves. Bunch of knobs, some screws. I'm going to put those over there because I won't need them forever. The round hole style IC socket, which is stronger, though for me, and again, it's just my personal problem, it's a little harder for me to put the ICs in those. I'm more prone to bend the leads. I just have to be careful and not rush. So yeah, this is a bunch of, I'm going to make noise, bunch of jack switches. Nothing particularly out of the ordinary there. A trimmer whose legs got really bent in transit. So it doesn't look that particularly challenging. It's just a lot of stuff. Again, the jacks in particular, because when you've got a whole matrix covering almost all your inputs and outputs, that becomes a lot. And then, of course, all the potentiometers to adjust all your LFO, your filter resonances, your everything, your cutoff rates, shape. Oh, there's a couple of switches. Switch for shape and switch for envelope type, which is always nice. I kind of like that. So I'm going to do a quick look through the build guide. We'll take a quick look together and see if there's anything that strikes us here. So no, it does not have a front panel. So a DC, they finish with a DC to DC converter could be used to add DC power. It's recommended that 100 milliamp per rail power supply is available. Output of this converter should be 9 volts, plus 9, minus 9, and should be able to run from a 12 volt. Yeah, exactly. So you can go ahead and get a converter to convert from eurorack power at 12 volts to the 9 volts that this needs. I might do that in the future depending on how good this sounds and whether I want to keep it in my rack and use it a lot. We'll find that out once we get it all together. So that's the parts, and that's the way it's going to go together. So I'm going to get the soldering iron heating up and we'll get started on this thing. This, of course, board is big enough to justify using the PCB holder. We'll just set it up in here so it's not interfering with any particular components as I solder along. Now it seems the PCB holder seems to be gripping correctly, but you know I'm going to get mad at it at some point. So just stand by for that exciting part of the video. Now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to install all these many diodes. If I can find the bag again. I'm looking for the other, because there's one hotkey in here somewhere. Well, I'll just do these first. Oops. And as usual with this level of detail, I'm going to put it on fast forward so you don't have to watch each diode in real time. And I'm going to turn on so I can listen. I'm going to turn on WQXR, which is classical music out of New York City, which I've been listening to my whole life, and I believe they are the best classical music station in the world. And I'm listening to it on their app since I'm in California. But we're going to be starting with Joseph Haydn's Symphony Number 57 in D major. So enjoy watching diodes going on. So that's the diodes, and I've got a couple of comments on the board. First off, it's all the holes are plated all the way through. Oops, I missed that one. All the holes are plated all the way through, which is good. You probably couldn't notice or didn't pay attention or didn't care to pay attention, but for the diodes in particular, the pitch of the holes on this is really wide. In other words, on these diodes, for example, you can see I've got a little kink in the lead because I folded the leads too short, thinking it was a more pitch layout that was more accurate to 4148 diodes. Some PCB layout programs do a better job than others on setting the pitch for the holes closer to the length of the part. So it took me 2 or 3 attempts to get the actual sizing I wanted to do for the 4148 diodes. These were fine, that they're standard pitch. So that is diodes. Now I assume we're going to go into resistor land. So I'm going to go back into fast motion and do the resistors. Oh, one other thing about the board, sorry, before I go off. All the components do have their values silkscreened on the board, including the potentiometers. So if you don't have a build guide, don't have a bill of materials, you just get the bare PCB from Thonk or whomever, you can figure out how to put this together without too much difficulty. So now again it's resistor time, so resistor time means fast motion. Resistor time is over. A lot of resistors. And one thing I will point out about the board is there's a lot of space. You're not going to feel too cramped. This is not a challenging board in terms of dexterity to get at solder points without fouling things. Now, you will end up with one more resistor, and the author talks about this specifically in step 1 of the build guide, so you're not taken by surprise. Gosh darn it. Apparently, the envelope doesn't trigger from Arturia devices when using the 100K resistor here at R5. So they've provided a 47K resistor to put in at R5 if you have that system, or if you think you're going to have an issue there. Obviously, or not obviously, I don't have that here, so we're just using the designed 1K resistor. Or whatever the heck it is, 100K resistor, sorry. Now I'm scrolling through because I didn't follow the build guide for resistors, because resistors are resistors. Okay, and now we're going to do all the little caps, and we've got square foil type caps, we've got, oh that's an LED, we've got disc caps, we've got electrolytic caps, and similar to resistors, there's nothing particularly interesting to talk about for these, particularly on this board, since it's laid out very well, and I don't anticipate any problems putting these on. So once again, we'll go into fast motion and put all the caps in. Got a little bit ahead of the build guide and soldered all the box caps in earlier. It's not a problem, but just wanted to mention that I'm going out of sequence. Now we'll put the matched pair of transistors at Q2 and Q3, and let's see where that is, just to be sure. Oh, one interesting thing, as I mentioned that the values are all silk screened on the board. However, that's not quite correct. Some of the small disc caps and these transistors do not have their values, or in the case of the transistors, their part numbers marked. I don't know why some are and some aren't. So yeah, you will need the build guide or bill of materials to put this together, because you don't want to guess on the small caps and these transistors in particular. Now we're going to place all the IC sockets, and that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them. Of course, the one socket that is the standard rectangular style has a bent pin. That's one thing you won't get out of these. These pins don't bend. Straighten that up with the needle nose. Let me count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'm missing one. Now this, interesting. This board, the sockets are, as you can see, in the middle, and I don't think my locking tweezers will reach it. Oh no, I'm wrong, it will. But that's the wrong side because I don't want to be on the pins. Let me come from the other side. Well, it's okay. Has that got it flat? Yeah. So my locking tweezers will hold it in place. I'll tack to the legs. The next big one. Now, as you can see on this silk screen, the notch end is not marked with a notch in the outline of the IC socket. There's a white dot instead. So that's how you can figure out your orientation. Clamp that one down. This would be an 8. these 6s are too deep. Oh, that pin's bent too. Or it's not quite perpendicular. These I really don't think I can reach with the tweezers because these box caps are in the way. That's my fault, of course, because I put them on early. But I think I can just hold it with my pinky finger flat against the board. And again, just tack one leg down for this one because they're so small. And get the other one. Another option, I will occasionally, if the board's really big, I'll just tape a socket down with blue painter's tape, 7-day tape, whatever you want to call it, to hold it in place while I get the initial soldering of one or two legs. Got that one a little up, so I'm going to hold it flat with my finger, reheat the leg, and there it goes. Perfectly flat now. And one more socket. Double checking that I've got the notches all facing the correct way. Fortunately, the board designer was kind and have all the notches facing the same way on the board. Most people do it that way, but sometimes you get someone who doesn't quite pay attention to that. Same thing with capacitors. It's always nice when whoever laid out the board has the negative leg all on the same side. So all the negatives, so you can see all the capacitor stripes are on one side of the board. Some people don't do that. I appreciate it when they do. Okay, now I'm going to solder all the socket pins, so we'll go into fast motion for that. And now we put in the one LED that this board has. It's a VCF cutoff. There it is. And since there is no front panel on this, you don't have to worry about waiting to solder this to make sure it goes in the appropriate punch out in the front panel. You can just solder it flat to the board now. Again, just holding it down with one of your fingers, so you can make sure it's perpendicular and flush as you can get it with the board. And now his instructions go through all the box caps, but we've already got them in place. Okay, so step 26, we've got a set of, or a bag of bipolar electrolytic caps, which means they're not polarity sensitive. Now we're going to do the regular electrolytics, and they are polarity sensitive. Interesting that he has a, or whoever built the bags up, I think Tonk did, but I'm not sure. Solder these caps last. I don't know why. And the trimmer, the way he indicates how to mount it on this, as is somewhat typical. Here's where it goes, and there's the little circle with the line through it indicating where the trimmer screw is, so you know how to correctly orient these. Same thing as the sockets. Let's peg one leg down with our finger supporting the component. And we're going to put all 24 jacks on here. Now I'm putting the sockets in, and one thing I mentioned in the build guide, the author recommends not soldering all the pins, just solder the top signal pin on the jacks, so they're easier to desolder if they're, to quote, now solder only the top signal pin of each jack for now. That makes them easier to desolder if there's something wrong with the build. While that's true, I'm going to go ahead and solder them all in on all the legs. And I will admit that a problem with jacks is the least likely problem to occur in a build. I mean, jacks are pretty much dumb and tough, so leaving them half soldered because you might have to desolder them, I think that's a little over precaution, but that's just me. So I'm going to go back into fast motion and finish up all these jacks. Actually, again, I might cut the cameras because watching me solder jacks is not that interesting. And all the jacks are soldered. Now it's time to do the pots. And we've got these pots, and we've got pots in a bag. We're going to do the pots in the bag first. VCO level and VCF resonance first. Those are the A100Ks. You do want to pay attention, obviously, to the values of these, and also the taper, the whether they're linear or audio taper. That will make a big difference. So make sure you get your pots in the right place. And now we're going to do the switches. We've got single pole, double throw, and double pole, double throw. And you can't really get them wrong because they only kind of fit one way. Again, fatter pins, you may need to dwell a little longer if your iron's not as hot as mine is, because these pins absorb more heat. I run my iron at 670 degrees Fahrenheit. It's a little hotter than some people run, but I do that because while it's hotter on a component, I'm on the component less time. Just a personal preference. And now we're going to put the batteries in. I mean the battery boxes in. So we're going to take the battery box and we're going to bend the pins slightly this way. Oh, these are stiff pins. And now I gotta take it out of the jig. So we're gonna put the pins through the holes. And then we're gonna make sure the mounting holes are lined up pretty much. I'll use my pointy thing to scooch them up a little bit, maybe bend the pins down a little bit more. And then take a couple of screws. Again, I've got these two spacers and I'm not, there they are, okay. He's calling them washers and we do want to use those. So let's see, are these Phillips or straight? They're Phillips. So we'll get one screw through first to get the board all lined up. I mean the box all lined up. This is, by the way, why the author said to bend the pins, because apparently the part changed or the PCB software didn't have the right template for that battery box. I'm over at my toolbox getting a stronger pointy thing, a metal scribe to align these holes, because this is plastic and my regular pointy thing is plastic and doesn't have the strength. I'm going to get my head in the shot, folks. Okay, now it's time to put all the ICs in their sockets, and I hadn't read ahead far enough. Step 49 says once you've tested everything, go ahead and solder the rest of the legs. So, question is, can we see? Yes, we can see. I'm just making sure we can see the part numbers that go in these sockets. The only ones you can't really see are these two, but since they're the same and they're the only 6-pin packages, it's kind of self-explanatory. All pins in, all chips in, dots or notches are on the right side, no pins bent, everything's seated well. And here's the unit all finished, and all the knobs are in the starting position according to the manual they have online that you can find. I'll try and post a link to it, but I might forget. Let's go ahead and look at the back. As you can see, 2 batteries. A relatively straightforward build. There's nothing too difficult about it. Components are placed pretty well. So let's dive in and put it in the rack. Or actually set it near the rack. I'm not actually going to put this in the rack. And there it is, and it's sitting on top of my little pile amp. And we're coming off the CV from the Division 6 sequencer, gate from the Division 6 sequencer, and then out. Now one thing you kind of notice over here is instead of the resistor to R5, which is the standard 100K, I've actually put a resistor substitution box in here because I'm having difficulty with the gate. So if I turn the volume up, you can hear it's just on, and CV changes fine. However, the envelope's not triggering, it's just always on. Now, it's interesting Let me turn this down for a second. It's interesting that in the build guide it says this resistor may be too high for some things to trigger the envelope at all. So I put the resistor substitution box in to see if I could get anything to change there. So with the standard 100K, I'm getting CV fine. Again, it sounds fine, but if I go down to 47K, which would be what you would do if it wasn't triggering, it still keeps triggering. So I'm going to go higher. I'm going to take the resistance up a bit and see what we can get out of that. So let's see what happens. Now, as you could see with 1 mega ohm, it didn't make any difference. I did look for other people who might have had similar issues, and they did play a little bit with the VCA controls. As you can see, as I turn VCA bias down, it goes off, but then it oscillates. I'm not hitting anything, and the sequencer's not running, and it's still oscillating a little bit. And when I send gate, it doesn't do anything in particular. Ah! One second, folks. Let me turn the camera off. So what I thought I saw, I didn't see anything. So it's still not firing off the envelope, but I'll figure that out. I want to go through it and probably close out this video now, and if I figure out what I did wrong or what may be misconfigured here, I'll come back and re-edit the video, I'm sure. I've been fussing with this a bit more, and I still can't figure out what's going on with the gate. So I've got an external MIDI to CV controller hooked up for CV and for gate triggering, and turn it up. As you can see, the gate's not off, but that's the signal coming off the gate out jack on the Brunswick. So it's showing that a gate exists, and it's obviously responding to CV, but it's not responding to the gate itself on its output, even when I have VC bias all the way down. So I still don't understand this. I'm actually using it with an external envelope, the Danny Sound VCA. So when I'm using it, not when I'm testing right now. So you can use it, and I can't figure out what's wrong with the gate. Your gate might be working better. Many people have success with this unit, so I'm not particularly concerned that the unit is bad. But let's hear it. I've got a little sequence going. And we'll play with some stuff. So as you can hear, it does lots of good synthy things, got some good filter in it. And if I could figure out why I'm not getting envelope, it would be just perfect. So all in all, the other thing I want to point out, so let's go back to the sequence. And of course you can pull out the signal anywhere along the line. Here's from the voltage controlled filter. So you can take pulse out and the saw anytime you want. So you can pull both oscillator signals out and use them however you want. And obviously there's a whole bunch of ways to go in and test things and inject your signals and do whatever you think is exciting. So again, it's a great unit. It's a little pricey and it's big. It's not, by design, it's not supposed to be eurorack centric. It's supposed to be a broader use synthesizer, and I'll probably make a little wooden case for it and set it up that way once I figure out what I've got wrong with the envelope. So that's the Future Sound Systems Brunswick synthesizer. Hope you enjoyed the video.